Hi, coaches. Welcome back to Big to Rule the World. I am Coach Allen, and this is continuing our series today on the college football semifinalists and sort of taking a look at lessons we can learn from them to apply to our offense. I know this is a little bit different of a series. I'm having fun with it. I know the viewership so far hasn't been so great, so I'm hoping we got some guys out there listening. But this is just my take from watching some of the semifinalists in college and the NFL. And we're going to do a series on college and the NFL, and then we're going to dive in and do one of our deep dives again into the history of spread offense. And when I say spread offense, really, we're going to look at the different branches of it as well, okay, and what we call spreading the ball out. All right. Now, back to the show where we talk about 3 takeaways from Ohio State. First, a look back at 2020 for Ohio State football. If you take a look at sort of an up and down year offensively, they get started late in the year with what the Big Ten does. The Big Ten was actually going to run a spring season. Can you imagine if that had actually happened? The Big Ten doesn't have Justin Fields, doesn't have a lot of the other guys that, we knew had good years in the Big Ten this year. Would have been pretty crazy, right? I have a picture of this guy right here because I'm going to make an argument later that the emergence of Trey Sermon, the emergence of Trey Sermon late in the year and his absence in the national title game is, I don't think it's why Ohio State lost. I think it played a big part in it not being really a game in the national title game. Okay? So Ohio State sort of goes through ups and downs, loses to Alabama in the national title game, and the ups and downs really are probably it's not a win-loss thing. It's just, I think expectations with this Ohio State team were so high. They were so high that if you don't execute on all cylinders, you're going to look like you're down a little bit, especially in the Big Ten, which was really a wonky Big Ten if you take a look back at it. Okay? Now, before we get into the first one, what is your personnel? I was researching an article, found this one on Vols Wire. I'm thinking it came from Dan Harrelson. Okay? Dan Harrelson is a name on the article, and it says, trying to see, 1 year after, okay, so they spent time at the AFCA convention in 2020 talking to Ryan Day, okay, and got his take. All right, and I think this is a great explanation of Ryan Day and the art of Ryan Day and why he's a great man for Ohio State. I think kind of the art of coaching football is adjusting to your scheme to utilize the personnel that you have at that moment. Day told Vols Wire ahead of playing Alabama in the national title game. So this is in 2021. We recruit the best players and then adjust our scheme. That's the coach's job, to put them in the best position to be successful. We have certain philosophies that don't change, but the way you get there sometimes does. Whether you're in 1 tight end, 2 tight ends, 4 wideouts, it changes year after year how you attack coming out of the gates. And you want to put guys in position to be successful. Also, with your offensive line, I kept this quote in there because big rule of the world, baby. Also, with your offensive line, what kind of offensive line do you have? What kind of backs do you have? What kind of quarterback do you have? And so then you have to evolve. We don't just say, here's our system and start plugging guys in. We try to adapt year after year. And to me, this was sort of wild to think about from a college perspective. I think we think about it as high school coaches. This is the coach on one of the top teams able to recruit, top teams in the nation. And he's saying we try to adapt year after year to our system and to who fits into it. We adapt to our system. We adapt. And, it goes on to say, okay, going into spring practices, talking more with Day, going into spring practices, Day starts from scratch with his offense and adapts it to his roster. At this time, he identifies who the best players are and uses them. The process is also referred to as his bucket organization. During the offseason, he wants his player personnel to go through the base plays a minimum 100 times in preparation for the season. And this is where they get the idea of how good they are, and I'm going to talk about that more later on. Okay? So, want to see how we adapt to different tools? Let's take a look at Dwayne Haskins, Ryan Day's year as interim coach versus Justin Fields, Ryan Day's first year as head coach. Okay? Remember when Ryan Day was interim coach for like 4 games there? For Urban Meyer, and then you have, just imagine here, guys, okay? You have Urban Meyer as your head coach. He had Tim Tebow. He had Braxton Miller. He had all these prototypical running, JT Barrett, running style quarterbacks, and then he has Dwayne Haskins, okay? What did they do? Dwayne Haskins, they gave 26.6 completions per game. This is the average per game, their 14-game season. So this would have been Fields' first year at Ohio State. Dwayne Haskins' only year as a starter. 26.6 completions per game, 38 attempts per game. He has a big arm. 3.57 passing touchdowns, 5.6 rushing attempts per game, 7.7 rushing yards. Look, we almost double the amount the quarterback's rushing for almost 5 times the production. Okay, and we cut the passing attempts down where he's not even attempting as many as Dwayne Haskins was completing per game. We adjusted our offense, didn't we? Okay, so my first big takeaway is be flexible in what you do and who you are. My big story for this is, okay, I love the air raid. Love the air raid. Loved it when I installed it back in 2018. That's my thing. I want to throw the rock. That's even as an offensive line coach, I love throwing the rock. I love pass protection. I love scheming up through that. Okay, I adjusted my personnel to fit that when I was a head coach. I originally was a gap scheme, run game type of guy who came from gap scheme, run scheme offense. That's what I played in. That's what I coached in. That's what I knew. You know, we're going to run the ball. We're going to pound your dick in the dirt. That's how we play. Then I got in and I had good quarterback, good receivers. Sorry about that, coach. Just had to take a pause right there real quick. But, yeah, I had good quarterback, good receivers. So we adjusted. We ran the air raid and said we're in more of a power scheme. We threw the ball a lot. Then my quarterback gets hurt in year 2. And I have a big 230-pound running back. Guess what, man? We ran air raid concepts and ran power. Okay? We're adjusting up front with how we do and how we operate stuff at my new school, too. Adjusting with different stuff offensively. Does it mean you switch a whole new offense every year? No. Is Ohio State switching a whole new offense every year? No. Build your basics and highlight the players who you know are your best players. Highlight your best guys. Okay, lesson number 2, the power of the hot hand goes back into highlighting your best guys. Okay, Trey Sermon, transfer from the University of Oklahoma. First 4 games, 45 carries, 232 yards, 0 TDs. We're not really having that explosive back prop, and that was a problem for Ohio State early on. What happens to the next 3 games? So your season finale against Michigan State, your Big Ten championship game against Northwestern, and your game against Clemson. This doesn't even count his receiving numbers. 70 carries, 536 yards, 4 touchdowns. He is a big reason that the Ohio State offense struggled so much in the national championship game because he's hurt after 1 carry. He's done. Okay, he was supposed to be a big part going into that national championship game, and he wasn't even the starter beginning of the year. Ride your hot hand. Develop your backs where you're going to need them eventually, okay? Ride your hot hand. Find ways to develop guys who necessarily aren't clicking early on. Number 3, the power of the system and game planning. I wanted to take a read from that same article I was talking about. Just talking about Ryan Day's offense, talking about his offense features a tight zone where the running back is ready to follow the center going downhill. In tight zone, there can be up to 6 different variations. So, you know, much like an inside zone scheme, I've talked about our inside zone scheme before. We love to run the inside zone in a bunch of different ways. Okay? It talks about, you know, Raider. Some of them, you know, will block C-gap with a tight end, but here takes place by bringing the defensive end with a tight end blocks B-gap overhang. You know, just different adjustments to tight zone or inside zone. Mid-zone is where the running back aims for the inside of God, providing a wider play. You know, for me, that's my inside zero. Okay, outside zone is also scheme. Okay, he runs everything in gap zone. He stresses the scheme which the guard pulls and blocks out. To me, I would just call that gap. That's just me. He also bases his perimeter running game with plays such as speed sweep. In a weekly game plan, Day prepares 2 tight zone type plays. So we talked about the 6 variations. 2 mid zone type plays. So we talked about the inside zero variations. 1 outside zone, power, counter, and up to 2 perimeter runs. Okay? Base plays are practiced and worked on during the offseason so Day's players understand them thoroughly through the season. We go into the game plan. He fills out his menu. Same thing can be done through the passing game. He fills out his menu, and then he reps it, okay? That is what he is doing. You know, it dives into situational plays are also worked on during the offseason routinely. Red zone 2-minute. How are you designing your offense? How are you scripting your plays? How are you going about everything you're doing to put in your game plan? What is your game plan looking at? The power of a system. Ryan Day has a system. He is an organizational nut, is what I've come to find with studying him. And I think that is something we can all take from. Okay, so 3 things you can take back to your team, whether or not you're offensive coordinator, offensive line coach, whatever. Number 1, highlight your best players and scheme to it. Scheme around what your best guys do. I put in gap scheme when I had a 230-pound running back who could hit that darn hole. And when I had a quarterback who, when he hurt his shoulder, became a very good running back. Keep your backs and receivers involved throughout the season. You never know what's going to happen in any given situation, guys. You never know what's going to happen, who's going to develop. For me, for Ryan Day, we talked about Trey Sermon. I can use the example, okay? I had a guy who I never thought would play receiver for me. By the end of the year was our leading receiver the last few games playing slot for us, which was a huge deal for us. You never know. Create your game planning system in the offseason. Be focused in your preparation for what you're doing. Be focused in what you bring in and why you're bringing it in each week. Okay? All right, coaches, thank you. Until next time, remember, if we want to win games, we got to dominate in the trenches. We want to dominate in the trenches. We got to remember that bigs rule the world. I'll see you next time, coaches.